Hello, my name's Elijah Wells, and today I'm breaking down the New York Times best films of the 21st century so far. It's like, okay, we are already a quarter way done of it with this century, and of course, loads and loads of great movies have came out. And of course, the New York Times have gotten a lot of attention in the movie community, particularly for this list. So I'm just breaking down all the entries film by film and see if it was justified for the film to be there, or did the director make a better film, or we'll just see how the list goes on. So, New York Times best films of the 21st century. Here we go. At number 100 we have Superbad, so everyone's going to be McLoving it at this point. And at 99 we have Memoirs of Murder, being by Bong Joon-ho, who of course made that incredible movie Parasite, which is bound to be on that list somewhere. But again, a really solid lineup so far. And then we have 98, for 98 we have The Grizzly Man by Werner Herzog, a really brilliant, really intense documentary about a man who goes all the way to rural Alaska to basically document his own journeys, documenting his time with the bears in the wilderness, and unfortunately that would have claimed his life, particularly for that one particular trip. He went a little bit over the hibernation season and he got killed by a bear, unfortunately, along with his girlfriend, which again, brilliant, a really brilliant documentary, but very disturbing. There's of course 97 for Gravity by Alfonso Cuarón. Again, I feel like Alfonso Cuarón has made better movies. Of course, yes, he did Roma. Yes, he did Children of Men. Yes, he did YT Mama Tupayan. Yeah, I feel like this is because he had won. This is the film where he won probably the most Oscars. Well, the film won his most Oscars outside like Roma or something like that, and even something like YT Mama Tupayan or Roma didn't, Roma or Children of Men didn't win anything. But again, a very somewhat of a surprising pick because, of course, like I said, he has made better films in that century. We have, for 96, we have Black Panther. Again, a really good film, and definitely one of the strongest films out of the MCU's catalog. Again, one of my favorite MCU movies is Guardians of the Galaxy films, the Avenger films, and Captain America: Civil War. And for this one, this is again a really good pick. I would hold back a little bit, saying that we need to see if let's say his most recent work like Sinners would go on to it, but I feel like this is a good enough pick in my opinion. But I think again, like I did just said, a close second of would have been something like Sinners, which came out recently. Further forth down the list at 95 we have Worst Person in the World. Again, a very good pick. I definitely liked that movie when it came out, and the director is making a new movie that did appear at the Cannes Film Festival, being Sentimental Value, which apparently I've heard loads of good things about it, but definitely want to check that out. And 94, we've got a master in this list. We've got Spielberg for Minority Report. Again, this is a really good, a pretty good movie in my opinion. Definitely does rack up attention based off the Philip K. Dick novel. I wonder if something like Lincoln would have gone to this list, or something like The Fableman, or something like that. Having Minority Report in there is pretty decent film in of its own. But yeah, if we're going to call it for that, then good for that. We have Michael Clayton, 93. 92, we have Gladiator. Even though Ridley Scott doesn't have the most consistent critical record, but again, Gladiator is definitely one of my favourite films of all time, and as well as one of my favourite Ridley Scott movies, up there with Blade Runner or something like that. Knowing this is a list about the 21st century cinema, I think other films could have made it on this list, like let's say American Gangster or The Martian, but given his most acclaimed movie and his only Best Picture winner film being, of course, The Gladiator, so it makes sense, so give it that. 91, we have Fish Tanks. For 90, we have Frances Ha by Noah Baumbach, starring his future wife being Greta Gerwig, who later did something like Lady Bird, which was definitely going to be on this list, given how really acclaimed it is. I'm hoping Barbie gets in there at some point. Or, knowing this is a Noah Baumbach film, I am definitely guessing, taking a wild guess, that Marriage Story is also going to be there. Again, this is a really nice, really beautiful film. Really gorgeous cinematography, and definitely somewhat whimsical as well. Definitely a brilliant film. If you haven't checked it out, please check out Frances Ha, please. For 89, we have Christopher Nolan's fan favourite film being Interstellar. Yes, Interstellar is an incredibly beautiful film, definitely a brilliant film on its own. Visually, it's still one of the most breathtaking of his films, and music-wise, just one of the most iconic he's ever done. And of course, cemented itself as one of the best sci-fi films of his century, and definitely one of the strongest films in his catalogue. Despite the initial alright reviews it did receive back in 2014. But I feel like he's done, in my controversial opinion, he's done better films, or films that hold up a lot more higher in my regard. Like, yes, he did Oppenheimer, yes, he did Dark Knight, yes, he did Inceptions. But again, I'm definitely pleased that Interstellar has got some representation there. 88, Gleaners and I, and 87, Fellowship of the Ring. Again, surprisingly, somewhat pretty low in this list. Even though, yes, we could wait for like Two Towers or Return of the King to turn up some point in this list, but again, 87? A bit of a surprisingly low coming, but I am again anticipating that it should turn up, like the sequel should turn up at some point in the list. And for 86, we have Past Lives, a debut film by Celine Song, who recently came out with The Materialist, which should come out in the UK relatively soonish. Again, a really beautiful movie about school friends that reunite, two school friends that reunite in New York after decades apart. Again, really good film. And another comedy, this time Anchorman by Adam McKay, who would later do more dramatic stuff like with Vice, Big Short and Don't Look Up. Again, with his comedy stuff, which a lot of his fans says holds up a lot more higher than his more drag stuff. And again, I really do like Anchorman, and it's definitely one of the more quotable movies ever made, up there with like the Monty Python trilogy. And now we went from laughter to depression with the very controversial director Lars von Trier, with Melancholiac with Kirsten Dunst, about a depressed bride finding out a rogue planet is literally crashing right towards Earth. Again, I haven't seen the film personally yet, but it's filled with very lush, very beautiful imagery, and just really haunting at best. Just seeing a lot of the clips of it online and all that, it just feels really haunted. But yeah, here we go for that one. And for 83, we have Inside Llewyn Daves, the Coen Brothers joint for this one. Again, even though everyone could agree their strongest works, including of this century, being like No Country for Old Men or True Grit or the solo stuff, one of them did being Tragedy of Macbeth, but so far we've got some Coen Brothers representation there. And 82, we have The Act of Killing, the documentary about the Indonesian genocide and the people that perpetrated it, and how they reenact their own crimes, basically using Hollywood films as influence. Again, apparently a very disturbing documentary, but it's also directed by Joshua Oppenheimer, who did direct the End movie that came out recently to a very puzzling critical reception. And for 81, we have Black Swan by Darren Aronofsky. I'm kind of a little bit at awe. Not necessarily at awe, but I'm kind of really anticipating the fact that maybe something like Requiem for a Dream would turn up at some point in this list. But if people are pointing out to the masterpiece or the most definitive Darren Aronofsky movie that he's done, but I think Black Swan seems like it's just a suitable enough pick for him. But I'm kind of holding out that I imagine that something like Requiem for a Dream would come up at some point in this list. And for 80, we have Vulva. And for 79, we have Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. Again, a very good but pretty interesting pick there. 78, we have After Sun by Charlotte Wells, with the major starring breakout role being Paul Mescal. We have 78, one of my favourite films of the decade so far, with Everything Everywhere All at Once by the Daniels. Again, a really great film. I definitely want to see what they're cooking up next. And this is, again, A24 at the peak of their strength. And we have another Coen Brothers movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Again, I remember listening to the soundtrack very fondly as a kid, so there's that one. 75, we have Amar. 74, we have The Florida Project by Sean Baker, who recently not just won Best Picture, but also won Director, Original Screenplay, and also for editing for his movie Honora, which again should be a pleasant surprise if the film is nowhere to be if the film's anywhere to be there. But I would be surprised if it's not in there, but again, there it is for the project from Sean Baker. And for 73, we have Ratatouille. Again, this is again a Pixar movie who had a really prolific 2000s and 2010s. I'm really hoping something like Toy Story 3 would be somewhere on this list or something like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if something like WALL-E would come up at any point of that list, or even The Incredibles or that. So again, during the 2000s and 2010s, this is basically the critical peak of Pixar in mine and everyone's opinion. We have Carol from Todd Haynes. Again, well praised for that film. And we have, for 71, we have Ocean's 11, being by Steven Soderbergh, who did Contagion, and again, did a lot of stuff. Particularly this year, he did Black Bag, which was a lot of people really liked that movie as well. And as well as Presence, a ghost movie done on the first person's perspective. Again, really prolific director that he is. And 70, the Let Me In. Oh, sorry, it's the Let the Right One In, of the original film from Sweden, I think. And we have the original from Sweden. We have 69. We have Under the Skin by Jonathan Glazer. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be zone of interest in that list. Somewhere up the list, considering how critically and how really delicately it handles subject matter in somewhat of a nuanced way, being that all the worst atrocities of the Holocaust happens in the background, and that the Nazi officials had just lived really mundane, boring lives. For Under the Skin, however, it's about an alien who goes around the UK trying to find some love, but things get super trippy, and also has Scarlett Johansson in basically one of the more weird, more artier stuff. And of course, they both since collaborated again with that recent Prada advert. And 68, we have Catherine Bigelow's Hurt Locker. Again, really good film, even though something like around the century, something like Zero Dark 30, despite how very controversial that film is, somewhat holds up a little bit more higher in my opinion, but again, very good to see Hurt Locker in there. And 67, this is going to get a lot darker now. We have Todd Field's Tar, a film starring Kate Blanchett as a multi-award-winning composer whose life completely shatters around her after some really horrifying and disturbing allegations have been made about her, and how she does not handle them very well. Again, a really intriguing, very disturbing movie about cancel culture and the Me Too era of Hollywood. Again, a really great film, very intriguing at best, but this is not exactly the type of film you want to watch on a date. So, very good film, but pretty disturbing. We have another very disturbing film, being 66, we have Spotlight. Again, a movie about the Boston Globe newspaper when they broke the story about the numerous sex abuse scandals happening at the Catholic Church, and how everyone, both the Catholic Church and people at the Boston Globe paper, pretty much were in for a really turbulent ride from here on out. And talking about some fairly distressing topic matters, but this time the movie got memed on from high heaven. We have Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. It was the summer of 2023. That and Barbie came out the very same day. And of course, Oppenheimer got loads of awards, and Barbie had a much huger box office numbers. Again, I am hoping that Barbie does show up a little bit at some point in this list, but at the same time, out of the two films, I did prefer Oppenheimer, particularly out of the craze that was the Barbenheimer thing that just went down and just completely took over cinemas. Again, a very good film, in my opinion. And we have the next film coming up, we have 64 for Gone Girl. A film by David Fincher, who again had again, this is no question about it. Zodiac's definitely going to appear on this list. Something like Social Network's going to appear on this list. But even with his collaborations with Netflix that seem to have divided a lot more people. Yes, I know Mindhunters is a bit of a hit. Yes, House of Cards hasn't aged all that well, thanks to Kevin Spacey. But also stuff he directed, like Mank did polarize some people years afterwards. And even To Kill Us was also again did split people somewhat down the middle, even though I personally enjoyed that film. For Gone Girl, this is again a really brilliant yet really darkly crafted movie about a couple that are essentially breaking apart and throwing allegations towards each other on their own perspectives. Or more broadly, it's about a husband who has a lot of skeletons in his closets, and then his wife disappears, and everyone hates him for it. Again, a really good film, but pretty disturbing. We have Little Miss Sunshine for 63. Again, a very fun, whimsical movie. I have to tell you this story because it was basically my aunt legit thought this was a children's movie until Alan Arkin's character sniffs cocaine and starts cursing out all the characters like, "Every night's the effing chicken, what's going on?" And he just curses everyone out just for having chicken like every other night, and he is not having it. Again, a really fun, really whimsical film it is. And 62, we have Memento by Christopher Nolan. Again, his earlier, a lot more neo-noirish stuff. Again, Dark Knight and, of course, Inception are my favourite films from him. But again, shout out to his more lesser-known stuff, pre-Dark Knight or Batman Begins stuff he does. And 61, we have Kill Bill Volume 1 from Quentin Tarantino. Again, really, really great film, really bloody, really fun, just a complete adrenaline rush throughout the entire movie, and again, just a really great movie. Again, there's no doubting about it, we're going to see Inglourious Bastards in this list, maybe Django Unchained, and maybe Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, his more critical, even though he's been critically acclaimed at a consistent rate, but his more recent stuff has been getting a lot more awards and got a lot more respect from critics. Like I said, from Django Unchained and Inglourious Bastards and let's say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And over at number 60 we have Whiplash by Damien Chazelle, who later did La La Land, which again I'm hoping it does get on the list, but highly doubt it because a lot of people hold Whiplash as the more better film that he did, that Damien Chazelle has done. Yes, he's done First Man. Yes, he's done more divisive stuff like Babylon. But again, out of comparison being La La Land and Whiplash, a lot of people hold Whiplash to a lot of a higher extent, so it makes sense. We got Tony Erdmann, 59, and we have an Adam Sandler film at 58 for Uncut Gems, being after a row of stinkers and basically Razzie Caliber films, he came back with a really intense thriller, Uncut Gems. And of course got a nomination, got snubbed for an Oscar unfortunately, but again, loads of praise came his way. 57, we have Best in Show, another Adam Sandler again. Well, he may win enough golden raspberries to open a grocery store of just golden raspberries, but in 56 he's in a P.T. Anderson movie, Punch Drunk Love. Even though my favourite of all time of P.T. Anderson films being Magnolia, but this didn't come out in that century, but however, if we're talking about other films he's done, like, let's say There'll Be Blood, Inherent Vice, Phantom Thread, again, Punch Drunk Love is, again, a solid enough entry on this list, so I give him credit for that. 55, one of my favourite Nolan films, Inception. Again, very glad that's on that list. Again, probably his most trippiest and most weirdest film he has done, in my opinion. Again, probably the most beautiful film he has done. Again, just a masterstroke of every stretch of the imagination. I just love this movie to death. I think out of all the Nolan films I've watched, I think I come back to this one probably the most. Probably more than the Dark Knight trilogy, to be honest. But again, Inception is there. I'm very happy it's there. And for 54, we have Pan's Labyrinth. Again, my favorite Guillermo del Toro movie. I think, again, even though he is critically a very consistent director, as in a lot of his films have garnered a lot of critical acclaim, even his most recent stuff being Pinocchio and his upcoming movie Frankenstein, which has apparently got some buzz about it. And also his other stuff, like his more action-y stuff, like Hellboy and Pacific Rim. But again, I am super, super happy that his Pan's Labyrinth movie is there, because that is just one of the most gorgeous films I've seen in my life, and also one of the best international films ever made. And for 53, we have Borat. It's nice. It's very good. And yes, very nice. And sequel, very good, come with daughter. And more controversy and Rudy Giuliani just in his panties. And for 52, without doing any accents whatsoever, we have Yugoslavomous' The Favourite. Again, he has done some other stuff which I did like coming out this decade so far, like Poor Things, which is again very vulgar but really brilliant movie. He also done Kinds of Kindness, which wasn't everyone's cup of tea. And he's also did Bognonia, which is another film with Jess Phillips and Emma Stone, which had a trailer come out recently with Basket Case from Green Day serving as his song in the trailer. I'm hoping he does that really well. And this being his first of now 4 collaborations he has done with Emma Stone. Again, very kinky and very artsy as well, but not everyone's cup of tea, but it is definitely a really good film. 51, we have 12 Years a Slave by Steve McQueen. And again, a very deep and very troubling subject matter about slavery, particularly in America. Again, knowing this is a Steve McQueen project, it's going to be bound to be somewhat really depressing. Of course, he has done Widows. Of course, he's done Hunger, a movie about Bobby Sands. And of course, he's done Shame, which is about a man grappling with a really disturbing pornography addiction. Again, if like I did say about Damien Chazelle, everyone who knows Steve McQueen and his films pretty much holds 12 Years a Slave as probably the highest caliber to that extent. And for 50, oh, we're halfway there. And we have Pixar's Pete Docter's Up. Again, this is the 2010s where it's basically the critical and commercial peak of Pixar. This time it's about a widowed man who travels with balloons attached to his home, and he sets off on an adventure to essentially in like the jungles of South America, or particularly the waterfall that exists in real life in Venezuela. Again, even though I myself and a lot of people don't seem to really care that much about Pixar's other stuff, like I mean their more recent stuff like Elementals or Elio or something like that, but again, everyone knows the really saddening opening scene and how whimsical and how really imaginative it is, that movie is, despite how it's basically about an old man who's basically realised he's coming pretty much close to his death and pretty much wants to achieve one more dream and has a little scout kid to come along with him. Totally nothing wrong with that. We have Richard Linklater's Before Sunset from 49, Lives of Others at 48, Almost Famous by Cameron Crowe at 47. 46 we have Alfonso Cuarón's Roma. Again, even though I hold something like Children of Men a lot more highly, but this is definitely one of his strongest films he has ever made. And also, even if you include all the Netflix original movies, this is probably the best thing that Netflix has done in my opinion. Yes, there's also like All Quiet on Western Front's Two Popes and all that, and so of course even a short film by P.T. Anderson with Tom York, Animal, which I really enjoy and I'm constantly watching back on it. But yeah, really good stuff there. 45 we have Moneyball, and 44 we have Quentin Tarantino in what could be his last movie at this point, being Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Again, a masterstroke of a movie. Just the acting is incredible, the writing is very sharp as usual for Quentin Tarantino, the movie's aesthetics is completely on point, the movie's visually is incredibly gorgeous, and the soundtrack is it's just incredibly brilliant. Like this is just pure Quentin Tarantino fanfare. Like this is the movie that all Tarantino enjoyers come to watch and come out feeling fulfilled afterwards. Like it's definitely one of the more very fulfilling films, despite clocking at nearly 3 hours long, but still definitely one of the brighter films in my opinion that Tarantino done. But this is just a really incredible film. And 43, this is not exactly a bright film, as it's a really dark movie. We have the South Korean original movie, Oh Boy, by Park Chan-wook. Again, from the incredible side-scrolling fight scene where it's all shot at one take like a side-scrolling video game, and to its really horrifying ending that pretty much still traumatizes everyone that sees it. And again, the intrigue, the mystery around this movie just untethers itself and just untangles itself to pretty much gives you an almighty gun punch at the end. And of course, the music in this movie is absolutely brilliant in this movie, and the action choreography is incredible, and the mise-en-scène is also really good in this movie, despite how very disturbing the film is. For 42, we have another Paul Thomas Anderson movie, The Master, being one of the last films starring Philip Seymour Hoffman until he unfortunately passed away a year later. And it's also starred Amy Adams and Joaquin Phoenix, who essentially the movie is loosely based on the Scientology and its founder, Elon Hubbard, but just loose enough that the Church of Scientology doesn't launch legal action against them. For 41, we have Amélie, the French film that is somewhat a spiritual remake, almost a little bit like Chungking Express. But the movie is definitely brightly coloured, gorgeous cinematography, lush music, and basically it's about a Parisian lady who's trying to find her own way in life, her own purpose, particularly in the late 90s Paris. Particularly the film, the main story starts a day after Prince Diana got killed in a car accident in a Parisian tunnel. And how she basically tries to readjust her, basically how she tries to find her own path in Paris, which is by basically helping people out. Again, a very sweet, very gorgeous movie. And for number 40, we have Yi Yi, Lady Bird at 39, directed by Gary Gerwig. And for 38, we have Portrait of a Woman on Fire. 37, Call Me By Your Name. 36, a Coen Brothers movie, Serious Man. Again, I'm still holding out that No Country for Old Men is hopefully going to be on this list somewhere. Just hoping. 35, we have A Prophet from the same guy who did Emilia Perez, which is a film that everyone apparently hated, except me, because I liked Emilia Perez and having my own opinion. That was before the Oscars had to retool their own rules, and that's before one of the actors turned out to be a bit of a bigot online. And at 34, we have Pixar's and Andrew Stanton's WALL-E. Again, definitely around a point where Pixar were pretty much pumping out hits after hits after hits after hits, both critically and commercially. Again, this is probably one of the better, one of the more cinematic movies that Pixar's done. Definitely applies to a lot of silent movies, as the movie is predominantly has minimal dialogue besides of the side human characters who have their own side story, but with the main two characters being Wally and Eva. Again, this is a really nice and tender sweet movie. At 33, we have the Iranian movie, Separation. 32, Bridesmaids by Paul Feig, who later did Simple Flavor, The Heat, and the Ghostbusters reboot of 2016, which everyone either hated it or ignored it. At 31, we have Departed from Martin Scorsese. Again, I'm very surprised that The Irishman hasn't been on this list so far, even though this is one of the better Netflix films, and also one of the better Martin Scorsese films, and also Kills the Flower Moon, which came out a couple of years back. Again, a brilliant film from him, but I think in hindsight, just looking upwards, I wouldn't be surprised if something like Wolf of Wall Street comes in for Martin Scorsese's other film that should come up in this list so far. Number 30, we have Lost in Translation. Again, really good pick. Again, I've only just realised that Kevin Shield, the lead guy of My Bloody Valentine, was the film's composer for this. Again, the film soundtrack is already brilliant. And definitely a really nice and touchy storyline as well, which is somewhat of a spiritual remake to something like In the Mood of Love, which is definitely going to be on this list so far. And Arrival by Denis Villeneuve. Again, very, very surprising. Unless Dune Part 2 or the first Dune should go up a little bit more high in this list, because Dune Part 2 is my favourite Denis Villeneuve movie that he has done. Again, he has done other great films like Sicario or Blade Runner 2049, but for Arrival, this is again a very strong entry in his catalogue. Again, not surprises on there, but if there's just one film I'm hoping should be on this list, also it should be Dune Part 2. Again, for 28, we have The Dark Knight. Again, very good entry. One, if not the greatest superhero movie ever made, and again, a lot of people, the best Christopher Nolan movie. Again, and the best Christian Bale, Heath Ledger performances, even though he unfortunately passed away way before the film came out. Again, just brilliance all around. 27, we have Spike Jonze' adaptation. 26, we have Autonomy of Fall. 25, we had Phantom Thread by Paul Thomas Anderson, which was for a very long time the last Daniel Day-Lewis movie until he just recently came out of retirement to act in one of his son's movies. 24, we have Her by Spike Jonze, a love movie about AI, which should not ring any alarm bells in this time of day, in this time of year at this point. 23, we have Richard Linklater's Boyhood. Again, a movie that took little times of within 12 years, as in they took like 2 weeks every year for 12 years to make essentially a movie about a boy who essentially grew up. Again, basically it's Harry Potter but about transphobia. For 22, we have Grand Budapest Hotel from Wes Anderson. Again, a brilliant movie playing on all Wes Anderson's strengths, and again, really great performance, really great music, great mise-en-scène sense, great production value, great production design, great costume design. Everything about this movie is just great. Should I say more? Oh yeah, I should. It's 21, another Wes Anderson movie. We have The Royal Tenenbaums, starring the recently passed away Gene Hackman. Again, just a much more downbeat story about a father who brings together all of his estranged children and pretty much sees who's on the will and will just have one more hang about before I eventually pass away. Again, a really tender, a bit more sober film that Wes Anderson's done. Definitely much more darker in my opinion, particularly the razor scene, which is pretty dark even for Wes Anderson standards. Again, if you haven't seen either of these films, then what the hell are you doing? For number 20, we have Martin Scorsese's Wolf of Wall Street. Again, not surprised that's on this list, and particularly being that high as well, so good for that. And 19, Zodiac, okay. Yeah, maybe a little bit lower, because I did prefer something like Grand Budapest Hotel or Arrival, even Dark Knight on there, but Zodiac, okay, but if we're talking about stuff he made during the century, Social Network is definitely going to be on there, but Zodiac, again, definitely a brilliant film, but not as brilliant as the other films on this list, but still brilliant enough. And 18, we have Why Tu M'as Bien. Again, a pretty good movie, pretty sexually charged as well, but I did prefer his other film he did, Children of Men, which is on this list. 17, we have Ang Lee's Brokeback Mountain. Just like Wes Anderson, just follows it up with, at number 16, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Again, a really good movie, brilliant action in that movie, great music and great cinematography as well. And also a really good performance by Michelle Yeoh in this before she won an Oscar finally for Everything Everywhere All at Once. 15, City of God. Again, how that movie's narrative plays out, it's almost like a really bizarrely constructed novel, as you do spend like quite a lot of time looking at the side characters of the movie, like how they all ended up, and looking at how from side characters go from point A to point B, and also it goes even as far to gives you a whole story about an apartment that was pretty decently run until it became a glorified drug den. It's basically about a kid who tries to run away from the slums, how gang-ridden it is, and becomes a photojournalist at the end of it. Again, a very great film, and how it's narratively pulled out is really incredible. Like, I wish I could see more films like that. 14, Inglourious Bastards from Quentin Tarantino. 13, Children of Men, my favourite Alfonso Cuarón movie, which is based on a P.D. James novel of the same name, which is about what happens when the world runs out of children, as in no one has given birth for like 18 or 28 years, and of course the one man has to facilitate a heavily pregnant woman to a sanctuary. Again, really depressing movie given how really grim and bleak the atmosphere of this film is. And of course it's Alfonso Cuarón's trademark of using one tracker shots, like tracker shots, as in cameras that follow from one point A to point B without cutting. 12, we have Jonathan Glazer's Zone of Interest. Again, a pretty harrowing and heavy movie, particularly although somewhat a bizarre concept, being that the Holocaust was essentially being played at the background while the Nazis pretty much live on their pretty mundane lives. Even though it may raise some alarm bells just on description alone, but how this is executed is pretty much just that we could be complacent to a genocide that's literally happening right now, and we're just going on with our lives. We have at 11, Mad Max and Fury Road from George Miller. Just a complete masterpiece of action cinema. Just everything about it is just incredible. It works brilliant as a standalone movie. It works even better as the part of this Mad Max world it's in. Like, even though Furiosa unfortunately didn't set the world on fire, and of course I did like the other stuff from the Mad Max world, like the original trilogy. But this is Mad Max at his full game. Like, the action is just enthralling, the music's intense, the villains is pretty intimidating. Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy have some incredible chemistry, even though they apparently did not get along that well. But everything in that movie is just absolute brilliance, and it's just a non-stop adrenaline rush from the first minute to the closing credits. And now we're on to the final stretch. For number 10, we're at number 10 now. For number 10, we have Social Network from David Fincher. Again, they're apparently making a sequel about this, but apparently about the 2016 election interference and how Mark Zuckerberg pretty much put his head in the sand about that issue, and the eventual January 6th riots. Again, this basically shows, yes, Mark Zuckerberg was a massive scumbag before pretty much being hounded by the press and Congress and governments and authorities pretty much on a daily basis at this point. Again, even though I think it's just case the more you think about this movie and more how much of an unlikable a-hole that Mark Zuckerberg is, and that look at me, I'm wearing a black shirt with a gold chain, look, I'm trying to be all hip and that. Again, it's a pretty intriguing movie about how one person can just backstab everyone to basically be fronting the most influential website of the 21st century, being Facebook. Then like Instagram and Threads, even though that hasn't really taken off really, even though I have it, but yeah. And for number 9, we have Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away. Again, no list without the best film of the century is complete without some Miyazaki, or at least Spirited Away. Like, come on. If you haven't had that on your list of best films of centuries, then what the hell are you doing? Like, this is absolutely brilliant. Like I said, it's one of my favourite films of all time. Like it had to be there, of course. Of course, you could put, like, House Moving Castle in there, or The Wind Rises, or Boy and the Heron in there. Like, if you're going to have to choose one, Spirited Away, no questions asked, just put Spirited Away right away. 8, we have Jordan Peele's Get Out. Again, basically, it's Guess Who's Coming for Dinner, but with a major horror edge, and also a bit of a whimsical take on being John Malkovich, as in going into the subconscious of a man. Again, really interesting concept, really pretty disturbing in some instances, and how the movie and pretty much goes around that idea. It's just really intriguing at best. Particularly being Jordan Peele was a comedian at one point, and later did like a lot of horror movies, like with Nope and Us. And 7, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a brilliant movie about pretty much erasing someone out of your memory, but wanting to come back to them, pretty much starting from square one. Again, a really incredible movie, really beautifully shot as well, and also some gorgeous music. And 6, we have the Coen Brothers' No Country for Old Men, being based off a Cormac McCarthy novel. Basically, Anton Chigurh being portrayed by Javier Bardem is probably one of the most intense people to grace our screens. And this is from the same author that gave us Blood Meridian. Like, this is a really intense movie, just really uncomfortable, as it's about several people going after some drug money, and we'll just say Anton Chigurh either is ahead of a trail or behind a trail, and we'll just say he's packing some air guns, but again, really interesting movie, just really intense, really uncomfortable at best, particularly in a scene where he goes to a convenience store and flips a coin and decides to shop on his fate. Like, that scene alone is just really terrifying on its own. Number 5, Moonlight by Barry Jenkins. A promising name that unfortunately got sold out because he directed a Lion King prequel in live action. Again, a really good movie about a black kid in Miami trying to figure his own place in the world. Again, a very gorgeously shot movie and really good music as well. And the acting, particularly Mahershala Ali, who's only in this movie very briefly. Again, this is like a really gorgeous movie. In the Mood for Love, number 4. Even though I prefer the director's other film being Chungking Express, but this is again a very incredible movie about basically about two people who live in different apartments next to each other in 1960s, 50s China, Hong Kong. But again, this is a very beautiful movie. Just the mise-en-scène and how both these characters go through their struggles, and just everything about this, just such a gorgeous painting on its own. Just really gorgeous movie. 3, we have There Will Be Blood by P.T. Anderson. It's kind of similar to Social Network, where greed essentially corrupts the man in a lot of sense. Like, in the sense of Social Network, it's about a person who backstabs his friends to be a head of a tech company. For There Will Be Blood, it's about a man who backstabs a lot of people to be a head of an oil company, where, of course, like both movies, they're basically a gold mine at both their historical periods. And Daniel Day-Lewis is just at the top of his game in this movie. And also, I think this is the first major movie to have Johnny Greenwood, the guitarist of the band Radiohead, which I really like, pretty much composing that movie. And the music is incredible. I'm surprised it didn't get a nomination at all for that music, because it's absolutely brilliant playing its A-game. And even the cinematography, which has goes on spanning with desert dunes and oil fields. Again, some very gorgeous stuff. And the acting of Daniel Day-Lewis is absolutely insanely good. This is a trilogy of his stuff he did, as in the unofficial Oscar-winning trilogy, like My Left Foot, There'll Be Blood, then later with Lincoln, where he won Oscars for all 3 of these films. And number 2 for Mulholland Drive by the recently passed away David Lynch. Basically about an actress with insomnia who stays over at different and upcoming actresses and figure out what just happened to her. This is a really weird and really trippy movie. Again, honestly have not the brightest idea what was going on in this movie, but it was horny. That was my literal letterbox review I did for this movie. And it's definitely a movie that's just peak David Lynch, even though something like Blue Velvet, which came out in 1986, flies a lot more higher in my opinion. But again, I really just found how weird and narrative-wise very experimental it is, particularly how itty-gritty Hollywood is. Again, very interesting film. Now for the number 1 film of the 21st century, according to New York Times, it's Parasite by Bong Joon-ho. We almost started the list with Memoirs of Murder by Bong Joon-ho. Now we've ended this list with probably one of the greatest films probably of all time. So much so I could just brag on and on and on about this movie, the absolutely consequential history this movie made, being the first foreign film to win the Best Picture award, the first Korean film to even be nominated as well. And this is basically the movie that not just puts Bong Joon-ho on the map, but puts him on the map permanently, like Spielberg or Hitchcock or Kubrick. Pretty much people are now straight up studying his works. That being the gateway, that is Parasite, about a poor, down at the bottom family who basically worked their way up the ranks to work for a really rich family, thanks to one son who pretty much got employed there. And it's a really witty and somewhat entertaining movie that has some incredible, probably one of the best twists I've seen in a while. And how the movie somewhat deconstructs the social class in Korea to make it more digestible for the more international viewer like me in the UK. And how it pretty much projects that to our own, like he did with his more recent stuff with Mickey 17 with Mark Ruffalo's character. And it's not just that the relatability is also great, but it's also his direction and his writing for a lot of his films is pretty much incredible at this point. It's just stunning how one person can imagine a situation about a poor family who work up the ranks and made it to the top behind the rich family's back, and somewhat goes somewhat awry when something gets brought up, being the twist ending, which is again a really incredible movie. I cannot recommend you enough to watch Parasite. So here it is, the best films of the 21st century from New York Times. So, what do you think of the New York Times Best Films of the Century list? Let me know in the comments below, subscribe to my channel, like this video, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Letterboxd and Threads, and this is Elijah Ross, and bye.